And welcome to ETF Edge, your go-to place for everything exchange-traded funds. I'm your host, Bob Pisani. Today, can an ETF be a platform for climate change? Earlier this month, engine number one came out of nowhere and won 3 Exxon Mobil board seats after a 6-month proxy fight. The company says Exxon needs to significantly reduce emissions and move toward a cleaner energy strategy. Last week, they launched the engine number one Transform 500 ETF. The symbol is VOTE, V-O-T-E. Get it? What's next for engine number one? Let's find out from Jennifer Groundsio. She's the CEO of engine number one. Jennifer, thanks for joining us. Also joining us by phone, Arnie Nowak, head of Systemic Investment Solutions for the Americas for DWS. He runs 2 of the largest ESG ETFs. That's the X-Trackers ESG Leaders Equity ETF. The symbol is USSG. And the X-Trackers S&P 500 ESG SNPE is the symbol there. Jennifer, back to you. You won the proxy fight with Exxon. Now you have an ETF to buy shares in companies you're going to use in upcoming proxy fights. Can you explain to the viewers how you're going to use this ETF and what you'll be doing with it? Explain the strategy behind it.
Thank you, Bob. Engine number one, we have a new paradigm. So as a firm, we are looking to take data and do a better and better job of how the impacts that companies make link back to their long-term economic value. And so as a firm, we'll do this in a range of ways. We think it's time for investors, whether they're public plans, wealthy families, or frankly, millennials and personal investors. It's time, and there's a demand for people to be active owners. They want to be activists. They want to have their views reflected in what these large companies do and how these large companies manage for long-term economic value over time. So what we've done with the engine number one ETF is we've created a product that simply holds the largest 500 companies to start. So passive isn't bad, indexes aren't bad. And then we are long-term owners and long-term managers of those companies. And so we'll be very active. Every year we'll be very assertive on how we vote all of those shares on the behalf of the clients. And we also, as the fund grows, have an ability to have conversations with these companies and be very active on how they understand their impacts today and how they drive to long-term value over time. So more to come from us on the specific way we're going to work with some of these companies.
Well, let me try to nail you down a little bit here. Are your next target going to be a specific target like Exxon Mobil, or suddenly you're going to be involved in a number of different board fights with a number of different companies? Give me a sense of the roadmap here.
Yeah, if you think about traditional activism or traditional impact activism, like what we did with Exxon, that's a very big deal. And there's a lot of work ahead on that one, I would say. And so our objective is not to always do something that's as big as Exxon. Our objective is not to always do something where there's a proxy fight. There are a couple of companies that we're already looking at and working with that actually are positive examples where we think they're doing the right thing in understanding transformation in their industry. And so they may actually be undervalued today because they're not getting credit for decisions they're making that will drive long-term outperformance. So to answer your question, in every case in the Vote 500, we will be active voters. Sometimes we will do a campaign that's as big and leads to a proxy battle like in Exxon. And in many other cases, we will be working with these companies with the data to show them how they can address impacts of their businesses, whether they're on customers or workers or communities, or whether they're on the environment and on climate, and help them realize higher long-term value. So there'll be a range of ways that we work with these companies.
You know, Arnie, what I like about this particular ETF, it's a little unusual, but what I like about it is it's the intersection of 3 very interesting themes. Number 1 is ETFs. Number 2 is ESG. And number 3 is activist investing. I'm wondering what your thoughts are here. You run 2 of the largest ESG funds that are out there. How are you participating in this debate? Are you planning to take a more activist stand, or the company itself that you represent, DWS?
Thank you, Bob. And first of all, congratulations to Jennifer and the team for the launch. I think it's a very, very interesting launch, and I'll keenly be following the product. And Bob, with regards to our portfolios, and in particular, let's say SNPE, you can think about it as very similar. There's 2 layers to our process. On the one hand side, we follow the S&P 500 ESG index. So already the companies in which we invest are the best-in-class companies of each industry group from an ESG perspective. And then on top of this, at DWS, we have a history of engaging with proxy voting and engaging with companies globally as a global asset manager on ESG-related issues. So I wouldn't necessarily think of us as an activist investor per se, but we, in all of our financial and stewardship considerations, globally take ESG considerations super into account, and it's incredibly important for us, and has been for a while, in fact.
Yeah. Jennifer, your campaign with Exxon was successful because you enlisted the help of Exxon's biggest shareholders, the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, the State Streets out there. How confident are you that they'll go along with other proposals down the road? I mean, do you believe you have a solid climate change voting bloc? Does that actually exist out there? Have you created it? I mean, what's your sense about that?
Yeah, I think in terms of how other companies vote over time, you should ask those companies. I would never want to speak for them. But at engine number one, the way we think about it is there's a relationship from the data that we see on climate. Climate is easier today than social. But in the case of climate, we can see the value of these impacts, and we can see how the markets are transforming. And so doing the work to make a good case on how does a company transform in their particular industry, what their footprint is today from a carbon perspective, what can they do about it to mitigate it over time as regulation comes in, as technologies change. And so our take on it is that we will be more successful on these issues if other investors come along. But it's our responsibility in each and every case to do the work and put the case together on why change needs to happen. And, you know, we're a purpose-built firm to do only this. We don't have trade-offs within our business. And so if it works for us to be the tip of the spear on these issues, and it makes it easier for others to follow on some of these issues, that's terrific. That's terrific for investors.
But you said you're the tip of the spear. I think that's a very apt metaphor. Did you, to get the Exxon story through, the three board seats, did you go to Vanguard and BlackRock directly and enlist their help? I mean, how did that all come about? Just give us a quick sense of that, because people want to know how the coalition was put together.
Yeah, and let me spend a minute on that. And then within engine number one, Charlie Penner led the Exxon campaign, and there's a lot of work ahead. And so I think there's an opportunity another time with viewers to go very deep on that. But I would say that the Exxon campaign was about doing the work, looking at an example of an industry, and energy is the prime industry where the world is changing. And for companies to make sure that they understand how things are changing, they have the right skills, and they can maximize their financial value over time, which it's a climate issue, but it's also a long-term shareholder value issue. We did the work, we put the data together, and then we took that data to everybody that holds shares in that company. And so it allowed other people to come along on an issue with us.